Hi there. So today we are going to go to the north. So the Northern Renaissance is taking place at the same time as the Southern Renaissance, and oftentimes those artists would travel to Italy to the south and learn what was going on at the time. Obviously, travel would be slower than it is today, but they were aware of what was going on. Um, and when I say the north, we're talking Netherlands, Belgium, Brussels area. So some of the changes that we see are oil paint. Jan van Eyck and his brother developed this oil painting style that caught on rather quickly. In the South, we have frescoes that are being made, which, as you're reading in your book, it's plaster and pigment are mixed while it's wet, so it is permanently adhered to the wall. So it becomes a part of the wall. Whereas with oil painting, it can be painted on wood panels that are being made by artists. Um, it also has a lot of other properties. Oil paint dries slower. It could be put on thinly and translucently, so you could have multiple layers. It allowed you to go back in and work in tiny detail. So Jan van Eyck was trained as a miniature painter, so you can't hardly even see any of his brush strokes. And we see his Ghent altarpiece as well as Man in a Red Turban that they think is a self-portrait. So we see a rise in portraits as well as self-portraiture. So a fun thing is that portraits could actually be a stand-in for someone. So what King Charles VI actually did was have an artist travel around and paint potential brides for him so that then he would review them and kind of decide. They could also be a stand-in at an event. So this was great. This helped fuel the economy, and artists were painting a lot more portraits. One thing that changes the art scene as well dramatically is the invention of the printing press. Gutenberg invents movable type, and this enables documents, printed matter, books, Martin Luther's 95 Theses to be printed and then passed around. So this is huge for the art world. Paper mills are also a thing that advances change. Economic availability for paper for artists is huge because prior we're using vellum, which is calfskin and is quite expensive, labor intensive, and so artists didn't make as many sketches. The linen canvas is something that we see that's changed also. The Mona Lisa, that's this tiny painting on a canvas, allows artists to make work that then is movable and is something that's allowed to be stretched over a frame. We also see frames being designed by artists, and it becomes a part of the artwork. So notice this as you're going through and looking in this chapter. We still have the plague, we have a war that's taking place, and the Great Schism. So these are all things that are happening in the social world that affects artists. Remember that artists are not making artwork in a bubble. They are living and taking part in the real world. We see more and more patrons and commissions on the rise. Remember that humanism is a growing thing. It leads to more secular paintings. Patrons want their portraits known. It's kind of a way to make a reputation for themselves. Along with humanism that is affecting artwork, it affects the North as well. One of the differences between the North and the South, though, is that the North is much more interested in tangible things. They don't care so much about, Greco-Roman ruins. They don't have any. They don't have marble, so you see wood being used. So natural things, tangible things, observation, they base a lot more of their work on actual observation than they do in the South. Everyday objects are something that's used to portray symbolism. So we're going to look at some altarpieces by Campen and Van Eyck, where every tiny little thing has some symbolic meaning that we in our culture today don't know how to read. But someone coming in to look at that painting during that time period would know and understand exactly how they were supposed to read and interpret that painting. Remember, however, with public and private artwork that's taking place here, when we think of public, we think that, oh, any person could see it, but that is probably not the case. Some of this work is made for aristocratic homes, and so no one would have been able to see those. Some of these were made for churches, but it was only for churchgoers to be seen. So a lot of the lower class really don't have access to these artworks. We see an artist handbook come onto play during this time by Cennini. So there's availability and access here for training. Artists are also studying under a master. There were guilds that were coming on the scene also that provided a lot of rights for the artist to protect them with commissions, to make sure they actually got paid, and they would have a portfolio of work, kind of like we do today. So hopefully this summary helps you kind of wrap up the Northern Renaissance in the early Renaissance, I would say, in the 15th century.